So at BibliNF, we find solutions to problems. Thus, over the last 3 years, we have created resources in the form of workshops, booklets, and videos on reading for meaning for the foundation phase. Marlene Rousseau, an educational specialist, leads the methodology that we use. Noktula has been trained and continued to be mentored by Marlene. And to all our intermediate and senior phase teachers that are present this afternoon, today is your lucky day. Marlene's going to spend about 20 minutes to show you how you can incorporate or include this book in your daily curriculum. We also have collaborated a lot with like-minded organizations to ensure that books are optimally used. So how do we do all of this? Money. I like this quote by Warren Buffett. Money is not everything. Make sure you earn a lot before you start speaking such nonsense. Yes, without donors, our work is not possible. Therefore, I want to take this opportunity of thanking all our donors for believing in our work and supporting our mission. This afternoon, on behalf of BibliNF's board and staff, I want to extend a special thank you to the National Arts Council for providing the funds for making it possible to have these 3 titles in 5 of the South African languages. While I'm here, I want to complete my thanks to Sasnef. Erica, thank you for being a great partner, for allowing us to use this venue and the streaming facilities at no cost. To our authors, Koli and Athambile, we can't thank you enough for writing this book. It helps us cover the gap that we have of books written locally and the African languages, especially in the intermediate and senior phase. Jacana, Carol, thank you for supporting BibliNF's work and making sure books are still published in the African languages. Marlene Rousseau, thank you for always being willing to support BibliNF's work and making it more meaningful. And to the board for always being active members and supporting me through this. And lastly but not least, to our smart and diligent staff. Cindy, Brian, Darcel, Eric, and Tula, thank you for always being willing to work together and making all of this work happen at the office and on the field. Without you, my work would have been much harder. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunitha. Let's give her another round of applause. Thank you. Next up, I'd like to call Darcel. She is our fundraiser here at BibliNF, the person that goes out to find the money and the funds. Darcel to the front, and she's going to give us some background on how we got to where we are now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I'm the technician at the back there, and the live stream is going crazy, so I hope it's fine. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Tula. As Tula mentioned, I'm Darcy, and I'm the fundraiser at BibliNF. So I have the hard task of raising money for the organization. And I just wanted to give a bit of a background as to how this book came about. So as Sunitha mentioned earlier, we do run several projects at the organization. And although commissioning the publication of books is one of our smaller programs that we run, it is one of the vital aspects that we do at BibliNF, because we can introduce new works or new storybooks into the pool of children's literature, which is desperately needed, especially in South Africa where language is concerned. So we are always advocating for mother tongue books, and we are always encouraging children to embrace their mother tongue. So ensuring that there's a wide variety of storybooks in children's home language is vital to us. So through our commissioning work, we have built strong relationships with many publishers throughout the years, and Jacana is one of them. She's sitting here in front. Our relationship with Jacana has developed tremendously, especially in recent years, and we were able to do some phenomenal publishing projects with them. For the Imbokodo series, Carol had reached out. This is how close our relationship has become. She reached out to us and she let us know that the National Arts Council had opened their call for proposals. And obviously we jumped at the opportunity. Sunitha expressed that she wanted non-fiction books for intermediate learners because that is one of the areas that we that's one of the areas that we not lack in, but we don't have a big variety of books in that area. Carol sent us a brief of, because at this time, Xoli and Athambile, there we go, was working on this book at that time. It was just a concept at that point. And Carol sent us a brief of what this book, or why this book was so important. So I just want to read to you a bit of what Carol sent us. So she said that, while we have managed post-apartheid to give access to schooling to many children, we have not changed much of the content of what children read, and we have not enriched African languages with necessary content for African language readers. Furthermore, women are still marginalized in post-apartheid South Africa. A lot of South African history books value men as heroes who inspire our youth and are silent on the role that many South African women have played in advancing our lives as artists, storytellers, and writers, as well as politicians and educationists. In writing these books, our vision is to recognize, acknowledge, and make known our elders and heroines from the past, who because of apartheid and our current Eurocentric school curriculum have not recognized South Africa, have not been recognized in South Africa. The aim of the books is to expose children, parents, and teachers to the names of the women who have been left out of the history and the his story books. The hope is that these women will become general knowledge for young children. And needless to say, I mean, after hearing that, Sunitha jumped at the opportunity to be part of this opportunity to create this book. So two of the reasons obviously was that A, it would expand our non-fiction books available for intermediate learners, and B, it would allow children to be exposed to strong women who were pivotal in South Africa's history. So we applied to the National Arts Council for funding, and we received 400,000 Rand from them to commission the publication of this book. At present, we are sitting with, is it 6,000? 6,000 books in English, Afrikaans, Xhosa, Zulu, and Sesotho. And all of these books we can donate to our children in South Africa. So so to end off, I'd just like to again extend a huge thank you to the National Arts Council, because our role in this project could not have been possible without their funding. So a huge thank you, and we are extremely, extremely excited to start donating these books to our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Docel. Imbokodo, women who shape us. Watinda bafazi, watinda imbokodo, uzokufa, ubobasoba. Watinda bafazi, watinda imbokodo, uzokufa, ubobasoba. Watinda bafazi, watinda imbokodo, uzokufa, ubobasoba. Yay, 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 yay. Yay, Imbokodo, women who shape us. Next up, I'm going to call Imbokodo Zam. These two ladies, they really shape me. Yay, I learn a lot from them. If you happen to be in the literacy field and you don't know these two ladies, you need to check yourself up, all right? These women continue to teach us. So, I'm going to call up the two beautiful authors. And before I do that, I want to do this the right way. Ne? I want you to be aware of who they are so that you get a better understanding why they even wrote such phenomenal book series. Can I tell you a secret? When I read and I was going through the pages, I was shocked. Some of these women, I've never seen them before. I've never even heard their names. Can you believe that? And it made me to think and wonder, what were women really doing back in the days? Because we never hear of women being the first doctors. It's always men. Am I correct? Women being pharmacists, it's always the first men who became pharmacists. So I'm also just very grateful that these two women were, they thought on a different level. Because this does not only teach young children, it also teaches us as adults. It motivates us that someone has done this in the past. It's possible. All right? So, the first one is Dr. Athambile Masola. She is a teacher, a writer, a poet. She is the founder of Asinaguthula Collective, a collective of teachers and researchers interested in women's history. She is a member of the Biolit Language and Literacy Collective, working on social justice in language and literacy education. She has written poetry in isiXhosa and published an anthology titled Ilifa. She is a lecturer in the Historical Studies Department at the University of Cape Town and in Pretoria in the English Department. Dr. Athambile Masola, can we give her a round of applause? Thank you. The next one is Dr. Xolisa Guzula, a lecturer in language and literacy studies with a focus on multilingual and multiliteracies education at the University of Cape Town. She specializes in multilingual education, especially in teaching children to read and write in two languages. She is one of the founders of a network of reading clubs growing across the country. She has written 4 children's books and translated many children's books from English to isiXhosa, and is also a member of the Biolit Language and Literacy Collective, working on social justice and in language and literacy education. Please give it up for Dr. Xolisa. And could we have the two authors come on stage and take us through this journey of writing such an amazing books? Wathinta abafazi, wathinta Imbokodo, uzokufa ubobhasoba. Wathinta abafazi, wathinta Imbokodo, uzokufa ubobhasoba.
Good afternoon, everybody. While we do some technical assist.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We know that there could have been many other things. Teachers and librarians are busy people. So thank you so much for giving us your time. And thank you to finally get to see Sunita. We've been doing this book during lockdown. So we're meeting Carol. I'm meeting Carol for the first time, our publisher Jacana. I haven't seen Sunita in years. I last saw her when she was a parent of a very naughty boy in my class. So it's lovely to see you again, and thank you so much for the support. Where shall we begin?
Let me greet first.
Yes.
Okay. Molweni, goeiemiddag, good afternoon, ekapa, molweni botishala. We are happy to be here. We've been looking forward to this first joint launch of our Imbokodo books with all the partners that are involved, which is Publisher Jacana Media, and us from UCT and from the Bualit Language and Literacy Collective. Tula, it is Bua. Bua speak, that is Setswana word, means speak. So we speak out on language and literacy issues and issues of social justice. And so I think these books actually are also talking to issues of social justice, even though we didn't put it in that way when we wrote the concept. But it is an issue of social justice in how we create content and how we create knowledge, as well as addressing the languages that we speak. Yeah. So I think, Mamcina, we should talk about how, what was the reason for us to write these books? What inspired us to write these books? Yeah.
So I guess for me it was, I've been doing research on women's writing for a while, maybe since my honors year. And the first woman actually who was in the book is Nontsizi Mgqwetho, who was a poet in the 1920s. And what I found fascinating was, first of all, a lot of people didn't know about her. But people were very interested in knowing about her. But all the literature that we had available on her was in journal articles or a master's thesis or a PhD thesis, which thing is not very useful to many people. So I've always had this bugbear that, like, there's this really interesting, and I mean, she's the starting point. She's like my gateway. And then I discovered a whole new world of all these women who had been doing amazing things. So she was a writer, but there were all sorts of women doing amazing things. And so I would constantly, poor Xoli had to deal with all my stories. I'm like, oh my gosh, guess what I discovered now? And so she would put up with all my stories, and she was very fascinated. I mean, it was in conversation, but it was also, what are we going to do about this? How do we get this to people who aren't in academia just like us? And I've always felt that it's our responsibility, even though we are in academia, how do we make our knowledge available to people who are not in academia? So that's a justice question as well for us. And so that's how it kind of came about. So over time, when I would read or I would find another woman, I would kind of put a bookmark and I'd start storing all the information. And then, because Xoli is a doer of things, she was like, okay, now we're writing the proposal. I'm done talking about this, we're writing a proposal.
Often we talk about, oh, let's decolonize education, let's do this, but nobody actually does the work. It's all talk in seminars and, you know, in halls. And I'm like, you know what? I'm a doer of things, and I like to work with somebody who is also a doer. We have been teachers, so we know classrooms. We know what we've dealt with in classrooms. And I was like, okay, we are teachers, but as teachers, we often hear a lot about how teachers are not doing their job well. We hear a lot about how our children are failing, but not like... And as if all black teachers were born unable to do things or incapable of doing things. And like, no, it has never always been like this. There have been teachers who did work under difficult conditions during colonialism and apartheid, who did great work, who shaped us to become who we are. And one of the social justice issues was to kind of uplift those kind of people who did this work, not just teachers, social workers, nurses, innovators, people who were in sciences but who did great work, but we never knew about their work. And so we're like, no, we need to show their stories in the books, and we can do this by writing, and we can inspire teachers to be active again. For some reason, people complain about teachers not being active post-apartheid. They were active before apartheid, but after apartheid, it almost seems like everything is settled and everything is fine, and nobody is showing any movement. I was like, no, we can still inspire our teachers as teachers ourselves to do more than just being in the classroom. Being in the classroom is a great thing, but also teachers can think beyond what is in the classroom, or they can learn from what is in the classroom and teach others about what they do. So that was one of the inspirational things for me as teachers, but also we were part of a group that started a school in Khayelitsha. And in starting this school, we're like, but are there other people, are we the firsts? Or are there other people who had started schools before? And I remember Athambile sending me a story about Pumla Ngozwana Kisosongole saying, here's a South African woman who went to Uganda and started a school there. And I was like, what, you joking? Okay, so we started being interested in these women to say, how did they do it under such difficult conditions when we can't even do it now because we are seeing hurdles and obstacles, but they had even more obstacles in their time. As we know, colonialism was very harsh on all of us and apartheid. So, but they managed somehow to do things.
So one of the challenges from the get-go with the book was choosing who. So we had 30, well, we had started with 30, and now we know that there's going to be many, many more. But even just choosing the 10 for each book and the categories was a big, big challenge. And I think a lot of people have been like, but you left out so-and-so and you left out so-and-so, and that's just the nature of lists. And we take whatever criticism people will share, and we'll take it and we'll improve on it in the next book because we believe there are going to be more books. But the decisions that we made purely were subjective. It was purely just the information that we had at hand, and so you kind of start with where you are, and it was a snowball onto the next group. So as I'm reading about Noni Jabavu, I found out about her mother and her two aunts, whom we also include in the book, for example, which is weird because that's the one family that was just so weird that we included them. And it wasn't intentional at all. It was just that it just so happened all these remarkable women came from the same family. The other choice was we've got some prominent women that are well known, and some people are like, oh, but this one's received a lot of airtime. Why would you include them? And we include them for perspective. So for a lot of people, Winnie Mandela is maybe their gateway into this world of women's history. And so we include her to show her within a context of more women. We also chopped and changed our list a lot depending on, this one's written a book about herself already and other people have written about them, so we can take them out and then we can add this one who's only been mentioned in this newspaper in 1935 and in this one journal article. And so those are the really difficult decisions that we had to make. And then it was also just how much information do we have about each person. So you'll notice even in the which one is it? Extraordinary Leaders, Activists and Pioneers, you'll notice we acknowledge that there are certain women that we know we could have written about. But on the one hand, we didn't know if we had enough, we knew we didn't have enough information about it, but B, some of the stories maybe are not ours to tell, and so we're still finding ways of how to collaborate with people in order to be able to tell stories. So sometimes it's enough to just list those names, and so we know that we've got more homework. And I think there's a beautiful expression I heard someone use who they do similar work and they're in the arts. And her name is Nontobe Gondombela, and she used this beautiful expression of saying, we see our work as a comma and not a full stop. So even though there's this list where these 3 books are a comma, other people can continue with the sentence, and we've also pledged to just making sure we continue as well.
And I think the women that Athambile talks about as women that we listed are indigenous women, and we felt, okay, we would like to write about them, but we don't have enough material at the moment to work with. Perhaps this is a project for another time. So it's something that we are really considering, but we thought, do list their names down, because when we come back, we want to remember who they are and then start, digging up information. Or that we could collaborate with people who are working on these women and we can write together. So these are some of the decisions we had to make about the criteria for choosing women in this book. But also, another criteria for us was for women in the arts, because the arts is always, like artists, I mean, most of the time when I see artwork, when I was a child, I would see artwork by men, and also during protests, there was like black art, and you see photographs by men, and it was difficult to see at the time, like, who were the women who were taking these photographs of protests, of the struggle, of the liberation struggle. It was hard for us to get to see who's who. But then we thought, you know what, arts were very important during the struggle. When we have gloomy lives, where we are, our lives are heavy and we are experiencing hardships and oppression, what brought us to life again was the artists, their music. And they are, and also that not just for our entertainment and for our soul food for the heart, but also for them to pass on the message about apartheid. This is how messages reverberated across provinces and across villages and townships about our difficulties. So you listen to Brenda Fassie's song and you get moved when she sings a song about black president, and you listen to Dorothy Masuka's music and you're thinking, wow, there was a message there in this song, a political message. So women were not just doing nothing. During those times, women were doing something, but maybe they did it differently. Maybe they didn't fight in wars, but there was another way in which they fought the struggle. But that is not apparent to children in school, because in history books we write about men who fought in wars, and we name the wars they fought in. But also, fortunately, in this book, there is a woman, Paulina Nomkuko Dlamini, who also was in King Cetshwayo's Isigodlo, she was a soldier, and King Cetshwayo recognized women as soldiers, and he trusted women soldiers, even more than men soldiers. So, but how come I didn't know about this before? To imagine a woman fighting as a soldier. It's only now that I started to see a friend of mine being a soldier. It's a most recent thing. I had never imagined it. But now knowing that there were women soldiers in the 1800s, for me was an eye-opener to say it is not only men who fought in the wars, and also that women fought as in many ways through the work that they did. And if I look at the Mabel Cethu's photographs, the work about how she became a photojournalist and took photos of, like all photographers who took photos of the struggle of black people during apartheid. We had never, heard of her. So for me, that was an eye-opener to say, wow, here was a woman who was also doing this work in that time. So those were also the choices that we had to make. We have to bring in this work of these women.
We could talk forever about these books, so you must indicate to us, because we love talking about this work. But maybe one of the things I do want to mention are some decisions that we made, just like important kind of book things. So we frame it as a history book, even though we've included some contemporary women. And the contemporary women you'll notice are maybe 2 or 3 in each book, people who are still alive. And it was significant for us because they had done something historical. I think in this book, for example, Masalanabo Mujaji is still alive, and Mamu Prikalia Bam is still alive. But they contributed something. In the other education and science book, Mampumzile and Professor Debelo Ngong are both still alive. So we also wanted to show them as you can be alive and still be doing something really, really historical. So that was a decision that we made. The other decision is, you'll notice at the back of the book, we include references. So we wanted to show that, firstly, that we, obviously, it's just a basic principle, you show where you're getting your resources. And even though we're framing it for children, one of the things that we've noticed, while I was a high school teacher, but even more so now in university, is just the politics of referencing and the politics of citation. And I think if we teach children that young, and it's weird because kids do it anyway. I heard from so-and-so, apparently I watched this. So it's already in the culture, but somehow, somewhere, it kind of gets lost along the way. So it felt important for us to include that quite prominently. So every source that we got, even if it was like a conversation with someone, we put it in there. And so you also get a variety of texts to show children, if you're researching someone, you don't just use one kind of text. You can show 5 texts, and you come to the same kind of story. So that was important for us, but also as part of just the politics of, we're not only writing about these women in the books, but we're also writing about the people who write about them. And that's not something that we take for granted, especially because there are, so for example, the story of Charlotte Maxeke. The book was only written, when did Zubeida write the book? I think it was 2017 or 2015. Zubeida Jaffa wrote the biography on Charlotte Maxeke, and that was the first biography that was written on Charlotte Maxeke by Zubeida Jaffa, a writer based here in Cape Town. And so you can't talk about Charlotte Maxeke without talking about Zubeida Jaffa. In order to talk about Mabel Gqetu, we have to talk about Stephanie Jason, who introduced me to Mabel Gqetu, Mabel Gqetu's work through the research that she was doing. So the fact that we even know about these women was because friends recommended a book, or friends were like, hey, have you seen this interesting person? You're always saying you're looking for interesting women in history. So we wanted to kind of pay homage to those friends. I mean, there's the acknowledgements, but also in particular the references. And for us, you know, that's a feminist ethic of citing other women who have done this work, because by and large, the reason why a lot of this research exists is because other feminists have made it their priority to write about this. So, and then there's, of course, and maybe Xoli, you can speak about this, is how you take Barbara Boswell's work on Miriam Tladi and then try to write it for a 9-year-old.
Yeah, that was another thing, because it's older women who've written these books, written about some of the women, and some are lecturers at universities, so they are in academia. And so you have I think it was a newspaper article where Barbara Boswell was writing about, is it Loretta?
Well, she writes about quite a few of them. Loretta Ngobo, Miriam Tladi.
It was on Miriam Tladi. So we asked her to, we said to her, we saw a nice quote from your newspaper article, and we would like to paraphrase it for children. Would you mind if we make it simpler for children, for them to understand? And so she gave us the permission to, and then we showed her how we paraphrased her quote, and she agreed to it. So for us, that was an important thing, because the information that is out there is mostly written for adults. So how do we abridge that information so that it fits the level of the children? That was hard in terms of editing the book, thinking about glossaries. Should we be having glossaries in the book to explain certain words? Okay, there is not enough space in the book, because also there are those design issues of the book and the numbers of pages we should have for each woman. So if we have the glossaries as a standalone, then that will take up space. So how do we then work with these glossaries, and then making decisions about explaining the words as we use them in writing in the book? So if we talk about words like ukutomba, female initiation, then we explain what that is inside the book to make it simple for children, but also to make the books readable for everyone and accessible for everyone. We know that grade 4 and 5 children might find it a little bit hard for them to read on their own, but we do hope that the teachers will read with them and to them. But grade 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 might pick up the books themselves and read, but it's important for them to find it easy to access the information.
One last thing. The pictures. I think we should talk about the pictures, because they were such a, maybe Carol can also speak to the struggles that we had with that. We included pictures so we'll notice it is quite a text heavy, it's not a picture book. That's part of the decision of it's for children who are independent readers, but also for parents to be reading alongside their children. Or guardians reading alongside children. Some of the images that we found, they tell a story as well. So you'll notice there's a profile of each woman so that they kind of stand out. But then we include And we were really lucky sometimes where family members shared their own pictures from albums, and we were lucky in that way. So some of the images themselves are historic. Some of the images themselves are part of that story. So we hope that people will also ask questions. I mean, when I was a teacher, we used to do visual literacy. And I don't know when visual literacy is introduced, but a sense of reading the pictures as well. And it was important for children to have, again, I think we tried to do like a variety of visual images as well. So we include newspaper prints, we include family photographs, we include, what other kind of images did we include? Yeah, those were the two
Like
prominent
maybe
ones.
pictures from newspapers,
Yeah.
or something like a brochure,
Yeah,
like as in
there was a
Louisa
testimonial.
Verver's testimonials.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you'll see a variety. Book covers as well. So in the case where we couldn't find a lot of pictures of the woman, we used the books that we had. So for example, we struggled finding pictures on Mabel Gletu. So we asked Steph, because Steph had put together a collection of essays in response to Mabel Gletu's life. And so we included, because we only found one picture of Mabel Gletu and none of the pictures that she herself took. So she was peers with people like Peter Makubane. You don't struggle finding someone like Peter Makubane's images, but it was really difficult. We asked Baha, we asked a couple of archives, and no one had. So we had to be quite clever in terms of finding a way to represent. And then when we couldn't, you'll see people like Emma Sandile and Louisa Mvemve. When we couldn't find any image, we just put a silhouette around, and that was the choice for that.
And it's so important to think about pictures as literacy, as part of literacy. Athambile just reminded me now how Marlene actually, when working with children, because I've worked with, where's Marlene? There at the back. We've run a reading club in Khayelitsha with Marlene since 2015, from 2015 to 2018. And every Saturday we've been working with children reading storybooks, and the storybooks usually have pictures and have words. And often when you ask children to read, they just want to run through the words and not pay attention to the pictures. And Marlene would stop them and say, please do not read a book as if we are chasing a train. Do you remember how somebody is rushing through, chasing a train at a station? With the book, you stop and you look at the pages and you see the pictures, you show interest in the pictures, and you discuss the pictures, you talk about them, what's happening in the pictures. So for us, literacy is not just the words, the printed words. Literacy is also the images, it is the drawings, it is the pictures. They are so important in the work that we do, work on literacy, and that we should see the work of artists and that comes through the arts and the work of writers as a combination of the two, and that they both work together to enhance literacy development in children and meaning making, because sometimes when you don't understand what the words mean, the picture will tell you what's going on. So children use those cues from the pictures to understand what is going on in the words. So those things go through together, and often people think that intermediate phase children do not need pictures, and we feel that they still need pictures, but they also need more text. So because pictures tell a story, but also that you could get picture books only that have no words, and this is how artists tell stories, through their images and photography, and we tend to overlook those things, and then they are harder for children when they get to high school, when you have to teach visual literacies, because we haven't done the job earlier on.
I think we'll stop there and then we'll chat more in the Q&A. Thank you.
Those are quick questions, so is it question time? Oh, later. Oh.
Thank you so much to Dr. Athambile and Dr. Xolisa. Wow, phenomenal women. So this is what happens. Yes, they do. They deserve another round of applause. Thank you so much. I just wanted to share that this is what happens when you sit with them. They have these conversations that are so informative, They tell you a lot of things within just a couple of minutes, and you get so mind blown away, and you're like, wow, I didn't think of that. So it's always good to have such women amongst us. Without wasting any further time, I'd like to call on stage Carol from the Jacana Media. At Biblionef, what makes it so easy and possible for us to do our work in schools is using appropriate books, storybooks, that our children can relate to, that have beautiful illustrations, that our children can be able to see themselves in these books. And publishers such as Carol, the Jacana Media, makes it so easy for us to win children over. Makes it so easy for us to even start telling stories, and we show them these beautiful pictures. So Carol's just going to come in front and tell us about the whole process of publishing these wonderful books. Could we please give a round of applause for Carol?
Thank you, Tula, and good afternoon, everybody. Just first, a big thanks to Biblionef and Sunita and, there you go, sorry. Biblionef and Sunita and her team for organizing today. I've been asked to speak about the role and the process around the publishing of these books. And Xolisa and I met for coffee, I think it was about 3 years ago, that we met for a coffee, and it was clear to both of us that Xolisa had a book in her, and it's actually clear that both authors have a number of books in them. And we chatted about how we would get that book out. And fortunately, we had worked together for about 15 years on translating children's books for Jacana. So you've been incredibly valuable to us, Xolisa. We spoke about, at that breakfast, we spoke about the lack of available non-fiction material for our children, the lack of material for children aged 9 to 14 years. We spoke about the need to focus on women and the importance of gender, and we both recognized the urgency of documenting women's histories and publishing this in as many languages as possible. You, Xolisa, immediately proposed that we work with the extraordinary writer, researcher, and poet, Athambile Masola. And so our two powerhouse authors began conceptualizing a series of books and focusing on the gaps that we had established. Believe it or not, these two magical women, at the same time as working on the writing of these books, were both completing their doctorates. So you've been an inspiration to me and to Jacana, and yeah, I thank you for that. So these books that you see here on the table focus on the women who shaped South Africa. Many of the women, I'm not going to go into too much detail around this because a lot has been said, but many of the women for me were unknown. I learned an incredible amount through the stories that we've told. But we wanted these children also to be, the women in the books, to be role models to our children. And they also needed to reflect the lived experience of so many lives. So I'm repeating a little bit here, but I'm going to give you a bit of detail. So we initially, the authors initially conceptualized 3 areas, and that was education, politics, and the art. And from that, it did take us quite a while to come up with the titles for the books. There was a lot of back and forth, but we eventually came up with what I think are 3 fabulous titles: 10 extraordinary leaders, activists, and pioneers, 10 curious inventors, healers, and educators, and where's the third one? 10 inspiring singers, writers, and artists. It was at that time that we approached Biblionef to partner with us on these books, and partnerships between literacy organizations and publishers are critical. And we tremendously value the work we have done with you, Sunita, and with Biblionef over these last almost 20 years. The work you do enriches many, many lives, and without our partnership, the books would not have been published in the 5 languages. We did then, as Darcy told you, submit a proposal to the National Arts Council and Biblionef were awarded the funding, and we really do need to acknowledge and thank the National Arts Council for their support. And then we got into the nitty-gritty of it. the writing began on these books. And you have to remember that it wasn't just 3 books. We're talking about 15 books. It was a monumental feat. And to tell each woman's story in 1,000 words is not something that's very easy to do. There was a lot of cutting of text and back and forth and refining. The authors also wrote the text in English and isiXhosa at the same time. So you can imagine the workload in that. And the sourcing of photographs, the arranging of permissions, the chasing down of family members. You met somebody on campus at the last minute to get approval of text. I mean, down to every last little minute detail. The creation of the images in each book. And I just do want to show you. Who have we got here? Here's one. Nokotela Lindalee Dube. Each one of these images, we called them rasterized images. We had to find a photo of each woman. We spent a lot of time perfecting them, picking the colors, making sure that the features all worked. It was a lot more difficult than it looked. Cover design. We had an early cover design that we came up with that was rather dull, and so we redesigned the cover. The processes happened again and again, and through all of that, we then also managed the translations and editing across the 12 titles. Sunita, you were very patient, because I know we did run over time with the delivery of the book. It was a challenge. It was a labor of love. Xoli and Atta and Jacana knew that we were going to make the best books possible, and I really believe we did. So, thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Next up, I would like to call a children's literacy activist, a teacher, my mentor. This is a woman who's actually come up with a methodology that we are using here at Biblionef on how to get our foundation phase children in schools, how to get them to read and write with meaning. So she is a teacher. She still teaches me. I mean, she's another Imbokodo. Aren't we so lucky? We've got many Imbokodos in the house. Please give it up for Marlene Rousseau. Keep the mic close to me. Colleagues, thank you very much. I'm going to try and be quite quick. We do have a handout for everybody when you go home, because I'm going to share some ideas for you, and afterwards you might just want to look quickly at the handout and pick up some of the things again. So let me keep one close to me. Oh, the first thing which nobody has mentioned, which I think is incredible, is the quality of the books. It's such a lovely shape, and the cover is strong, the pages are strong, and I think it's a complete delight. When you pick it up and you put it in your hands, there's a sense of joy. And I mean, when you open up and you see that fabulous sort of, every woman has this incredible bit of art showing who she is. It's beautiful. A lot of the children in our class is artistic. So this book is also going to, I think, inspire a lot of those children in your schools, in your classes. So let me just come back to what I really want. Okay, I just wanted to make a comment about the actual quality of the book. So I think can I just see here how many people are history teachers? Could you show me with hands? Okay, and how many people are who teach language? Okay, that's interesting. Okay, thank you very much. And how many people teach grade 4 to 7? And are there people who are teaching above that? Okay, all right, okay, thank you. Colleagues,
it'll be very interesting. The teachers who are teaching grades 4, 5, or 6, and even 7, I think you're going to have to look at how easily the children can understand the book when they read it, and understand it quite deeply rather than just surfacely. So, I mean, one of the strategies that I often work with when I work with children, and I've learned, and I do it more and more, I almost do it exclusively now, is that allow children to work in groups and read a text together, and not groups, ability groups. When I trained to be a teacher, we were told to put children into mixed ability groups. And I think that's the worst thing you can do to any child. And we can have a long debate about that, important debate, but we won't do it now. So I think it's very important to put children and older students, even high school students, into groups, mixed ability groups, so that you have children and students of different ability together. And they learn from each other, exactly the way we learn from one another in life. And I can see lots of people nodding, so it's great to see that. For foundation phase teachers, it's difficult, because they really are often trained to put children into, put all this, the slow, reluctant girls and boys in one group, and then the fast, smart ones in another group, and it's horrible because these become self-fulfilling prophecies. So, okay, it's lovely to see that. So also I encourage you to read the stories not the stories, to read the accounts to your children, read aloud, and then let them go into groups and let them talk about what they're reading. Because if we want children to become writers, which is what my big thing is, in the way I work, I get told to go into schools and work with children, bring up their reading results, but what I'm really interested in is getting them writing. Because if you can write, you can read. If you can write, you can publish, etc. So, yeah. So I've lost my sort of train of thought. Let me just slow down a moment. Okay. It's gone. I'll have to let it go. So, colleagues, I'm just going to go through this and make a couple of small comments. So, let children make connections between the women. So, if they've read 2 different accounts or 3 different accounts in the book, also let's start exploring, well, what are the connections? Are there similarities between these women? Is there anything that strikes you that that speaks to you about whether the woman, what their similarities are? And I think that's quite useful. And also, what are their differences? Because sometimes there are very stark differences, so that's quite nice to do. Also, to talk about in what ways are the women's lives who you're reading about the same as women's lives today? The same as your mum's lives, your granny's lives, your aunt's lives. In what ways are they different? And when you get to read the books, you'll also read a little bit about the some things that happened to the women when they were children. So also we can also say to learners, in what way are the children's lives that you're reading about in the book? How are they similar and how are they different to your lives? So that's just making those connections. The other thing that we also want to do is making connections between the woman in the book, making connections between yourself as a child and the woman you read about in the book. The other thing which is also very nice to do a little bit is for instance, there's a woman, an artist called Esther Mahlangu, and there's another woman called Modosini Mahapahleni. And neither of these women went to school. And yet both of these women became famous artists. So there's also a debate there about where does education happen? Does it only happen in schools? Where do we learn? What are our sources and what do we value? One of the things that I use quite a lot when I work with intermediate phase, if children are learning, it could be a story or it could be a non-fiction text, is to let them work with mind maps. And as they read, and whether they're working in a group, because they could do this as a group or they could do it individually, as they're reading, they create their own mind map, and they could write the woman's name in the center or draw her face. And perhaps on the one side, sort of the spokes coming off the mind map. What are the thoughts as you're reading? What thoughts strike you, interest you, strike you? And then you kind of record them on the mind map in your own writing. in your own handwriting. And on the other side, what questions are coming up for you? Are the questions about that time, questions about the woman, questions about today, whatever. So it's just a recording, then afterwards the learners can actually speak and report back in the class. Because when I went blank just now, what I actually wanted to talk about is that when children read, we don't want if you read anything, we have a lot of thoughts in our head afterwards. But what's very important to teach children at school level is you have these thoughts in your heads. They're kind of floating around a bit like clouds. Some of them are sharp, some are not sharp. But we want you to be able to articulate, talk about what you've been reading, to be able to make sense of what you're reading. Because if a child isn't doing that in class, if a child doesn't get much opportunity to talk about what they've been reading, how do we know what they've actually understood? And also, when they start talking, they hear each other, so they learn a lot more from each other. And then, of course, if that then also creates a very nice background, like a resource for sitting down and starting to write, because you've read something, you've thought about it, you've spoken about it, you've heard different views, and when you get down to write, you often get a much richer text. So, I always think that when we teach children in schools to talk about what they're reading, we're teaching them to talk for life, not just about school work, but about themselves and what they like and what they don't like and what's interesting and what they want to explore and what they want to study, etc. Okay, so just a little bit about that. We also can get a little bit more analytical, especially with the older learners. We can start reading in between the lines. We can start looking at the values that are implicit or explicit in the stories that we read in the book. And then there's a wonderful, it's interesting, just in the one book, there was the inspiring singers, writers, and artists. There was a My Hall of Fame, and if you've got the book in front of you, it's on page 13. It would be wonderful to let the children create a wall of fame, to maybe go home and speak to the women who in their lives, whoever they are, whether it is your gran, your aunt, your carer, your mum, who are the singers or the artists of their generation that meant a lot to them, the people they admired, and to create a hall of fame and bring it to school and share it in groups. And if they go home and they speak to family members at home, they can even ask the family members to teach them the songs, if it was a song, if it was a singer that the person remembered. And they could come back to school and they could sing the songs. So that would be quite a nice project. And of course they can write, if you had to ask your children about who are the women in their lives, who are important to them, they could write an acrostic poem when you take the first letters of the person's name and you write about them, or they can write poetry. So, colleagues, that's all I really wanted to do today, just to springboard some ideas. I'm sure that you might be familiar with quite a few of these. One of the things which I think has already come up this afternoon is that both BiblioNef and Bualit would be very interested in getting any feedback from you. So if your children do write something about a woman in one of these books here, or about in their own lives, there's a very big, warm invitation to contact either BiblioNef and post it on the BiblioNef website. If they sing a song, if they sing songs in class, capture it on your cell phone and send it through to BiblioNef. It would be lovely to put on the website as well as for Bualit. I think that's all I wanted to say, colleagues. Thank you very much. And if please, will you take a handout as you leave? It's got 2 pages. Thank you. Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you, Marlene. Can we give Marlene a round of applause? It was so informative. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our program for this afternoon. I was told to let you know that there is some refreshments when you make your way out. and it is halal, so feel free and enjoy. Thank you so much again for taking your time and attending such a very informative book launch. And the song that I was singing, actually, what Tinda Bafazi, it's written as you open the book. I think it's on the second page. You know, so this book just has a lot of information. Thank you to our authors. Thank you to Jacana Media. Thank you to everyone. Thank you for coming. Oh, yes. That is the most important thing. We can't leave without asking questions. Definitely. So we're going to ask some questions to both our authors and teachers. You can also feel free and ask questions to Marlene regarding the presentation that she has shared on how you can use this book in your classroom. So we're going to get our authors back on stage, and feel free to ask any question that comes to mind. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the two amazing doctors and Jacana and everybody that was involved. I'm particularly proud of all of you. I think it's a wonderful production, and Marlene was saying about the production of the book and the illustrations. I think it will draw any child, and the language is very simple, and I think this is a gap that's been there for many years, that's being filled now. Not only for the age group in it, but also for the language and the material. You know, that is such a big gap that nothing has been said in there's so little information about our women, you know, and our people. So I think congratulations, and I want to know, is it going to be, have you spoken to provincial about it yet, buying for the public library?
We will be doing it. It's just come out, so we will be submitting it.
Okay, we'd like to see it in the public libraries as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Says the librarian, Fadila. Thank you so much for that, and we hope that there'll be more books like this to fill in the gaps that we've all spoken about, and we look forward to those. I mean, the one thing that we didn't mention is that we are planning on adding 2 more books to the series, but we are still at the very early stage of thinking about them. The comma, remember the comma. And also we welcome people if they can suggest people and say, you know what, this was a great person. I can't write about them myself, but I would like to see something written about them. And because we can't know everyone, and we didn't know every woman in these books, but we had to learn, we had to research and write about them. So yeah, we would welcome any suggestions as well. The talk?
Yeah.
I think it is being. That's why we.
Nice.
It's live.
It's live, but I want to know whether I can go back and
Yes, yes.
Any questions from the teachers?
There's another hand here. Moses.
Okay, my question is it possible maybe it can be one of the prescribed books for the schools, since it looks like it covers both history and language?
That would be a dream, so somebody would need to make a submission to the Department of Education to see if the books can be prescribed. I don't know the processes for prescribing books, but I think I once submitted someone's book and it took a lot of work where you prepare for submissions of their work because there are other submissions. And then they choose one out of the many submissions. So we would love for them to be used. We've just read in newspapers also now that there are changes in language that the minister is planning and hoping that teaching, for example, in the home languages of the children, that the books that are here then can be used as major texts for those classrooms. And remembering that for many children who speak African languages, they do not learn in their home languages from grade 4. So from grade 4 to 12, the children switch to English medium of education. And often the books that are written are not written by, I would say, to be brave here and say they are not written by black people. And if they are, it's only a few people maybe, but also the books that they read are in a language that they are not proficient in. So what these books do, then they bring both languages to them, English and an African language. So that would be amazing if we could get them to use them.
And just to add, I think also dovetails nicely with arts and culture, especially the book about the singers and kind of any kind of projects that emerge from that. I mean, do a picture of Esther Mahlangu's kind of art and a project around that. So it's quite multi, I don't know.
Yeah, and LO, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I think about life skills in the foundation phase where we have like a big creative arts time in the life skills curriculum where the teachers can focus on the arts.
I know it's not a question, but I will say it anyway. We would also be keen to come visit your schools, because it's often quite rare, and libraries.
And libraries.
So people can see real life writers.
Okay, she's committing us.
I'm committing. I won't speak for both of us, but yeah, I mean, schedule pending, but I think it is something that we're wanting to do, and some schools have shown an interest.
Yeah. Yes, and learners must meet authors. In our time, we always thought authors are long dead, and they left their books in the libraries. So they must see that authors are actually alive and that they themselves can become authors. Yeah. Yes. The contact details. At the moment, you can write to Xguzula @gmail.com. Guzula is Guzula. Xguzula @gmail.com, and then I will communicate with the team. Do you want me to give your name?
No,
okay.
Please, it's my first name @gmail.com. So
Athambile. Athambile @gmail.com. There's a hand over there.
Not yet, no. Yeah.
Do you think that the ebook would be used a lot?
Yes, I was thinking at the high school, so I'd use these things for comprehension. And instead of retyping all your, it would be nice if it is electronic. And also, some of our kids don't like to listen to our voices for reading. So if somebody can read it for them, so they like to have somebody different in the classroom.
Yeah, we are thinking of building other content around it. So, for example, the organization Asnakutula that's mentioned in the bio, we're thinking of either doing podcast style, and right now we're actually at the piloting stage. So we want to use some of this content for podcast style, but we're also trying to figure out what kind of podcast speaks to both teachers and students at the same time. So we're open to that. I think we're also still experimenting with the content as well, but it's something that we're definitely thinking about.
Yes.
If I could just say, I know I'm going to sound gushy, but just a huge thank you and huge congratulations. I think I can confess with Carol that I too was like, who are these women? There were a few who
Mm.
And the girls were like, oh, this is interesting. And it was so interesting to hear the grade 7 girls say, but where are the South African books? And for us to be able to go, wait, we just ordered these books and we literally got them arriving the next week. And say,
Oh,
look,
wow.
look, they like inhaled the books. It was such a gift for us and for them. So thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Oh, it's so exciting to hear like the immediate impact, and that kids are asking those questions themselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Ciao. Hi, awusutshanga off wena.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I just want to add that you can actually even have your books signed by both authors just outside in the coffee area. Yes, both of them now will be here, so it's okay. Initially, we thought we'd only have one author, but both are staying. Okay, so I just also want to say thank you one more time. Enkosi kakhulu. Thank you so much.